my whole life growing up from a child all the way into high school, I went to church every single week. And in high school, my relationship with Jesus truly changed. And I remember I had this moment where I decided that I was going to truly follow Jesus. Like I was going to give my entire life to him, and I really wanted to follow him. Before that, I went to church because my family went to church, and that's why I did it. But as a freshman in high school, I remember having this encounter with God where I just thought, like, I want to really give everything that I had to Jesus. And as I did that, and as that transition happened in my life, I began to see things in the local church that I honestly didn't like very much. And what I mean by that is that I saw people in the church who said that our job as Christians were to love people, right? Like we were supposed to love people and accept them for who they were. And in fact, I was always told that you should love people, and then you should want to invite them to come to church, because that's what you would do as a follower of Jesus. And so what I would see is that people would say these things like you should love people, you should invite them to church. But then at the same time, they might not say this out loud, but it was like they said, but you better act like us if you come to church. It was almost as if, like, as Christians, we were in this club, like, and unless you did as we did, unless you said the things that you're supposed to say, unless you acted exactly how you're supposed to act, then really you weren't invited in to be a part. And what I realized is, in this moment where I'd kind of given my life to Jesus, is I realized that I had all these friends who really weren't following Jesus, and I realized that I would never, ever, ever invite them to my church. Because if I did, I truly felt like, because they weren't living their life the way that God wanted them to live their life, they wouldn't be really welcomed in. In some ways, the church, it acted like people who are not a part of it, they were the outsiders. Like we're a part of this club, and we're a part of this, and we are like the in crowd, and all of you who don't go to our church, or all of you who don't act like we act, you guys are the outsiders. And really that goes against everything that we're talking about in this series called Outsiders, the Outsiders. That as a follower of Jesus, if you choose to follow Jesus, then you should truly follow Jesus, and that really makes you an outsider. You're different. It doesn't make you better, but it makes you different. And so one more reminder is that we handed out a couple weeks ago, if you haven't been here, a part of this series, we handed out these bracelets that just say Outsiders on them. And again, it doesn't give you some superhero powers, but it's just a reminder. It's been cool for me to wear this. And everywhere I go, every place I'm a part of, I just have to remind myself that I'm an outsider. I'm different. If you want one of these, you can get them at the information center for free. And like I said, this church that I attended, it was almost as if they didn't want to be outsiders, but you are the outsider, really. And I can tell you that for me, this bothered me. As a freshman in high school, this truly bothered me a lot. And again, I don't necessarily think that it was done on purpose or anything like that, but I believe it was really true, because the reality was when I wasn't living my life for Jesus, I truly didn't feel like I should be going to church. So I decided, as this young and dumb high school kid, that I wanted to change this. Now, I knew that I couldn't really change my church, and I knew I couldn't really, change how they did things, but I had friends that I wanted to invite to church. I had friends that I wanted to know about Jesus, to know this passion and this love that I had found, but I wasn't about to invite them. So I said, well, I'm going to try to change our student ministry, our youth ministry. And honestly, I believe this. Looking back at this time in my life, I really believe that this was God birthing in me a leadership gifting. I really do believe that. I believe that it was God birthing in me something about this idea of leadership. I never heard about leadership, didn't know anything about it, but I believe this was God beginning this process in me of learning to be a leader. And I also believe it was God kind of birthing in me this idea of having a passion for unchurched people. Again, this was before I heard any kind of leadership talk or what it meant, but what the reality was that I had friends in my own life that I so badly wanted to tell about Jesus. I wanted them to experience the same joy that I had felt when I gave my life to Christ. But the reality was, I didn't want to invite them to my church. There's something wrong about that. There's something wrong about the fact that I realized that my life was so much better when I had God in it, but yet I wasn't interested in bringing my friends to church, because I felt like if they walked through the doors of my church, they wouldn't be loved, they wouldn't be accepted, they wouldn't be treated like they were a normal person, but they would be treated as if, unless you change your ways, unless you act like we act, unless you say the things that you're supposed to say, then you're really not welcome here at all. See, we as a church, we would sing songs like Just As I Am, which, if you don't know what that song is, it's an old hymn, but it really, the title says it all, that you can come just as you are before Jesus, right? He loves you for who you are. And we would sing songs like that, but the reality was, we didn't act like it. I remember as a child running in church. I don't know if you can relate to this. And I remember, some of the deacons or people would grab me by the shoulder and they would say, get down, they'd say, you don't run in the house of God. This is the house of God. You don't run in it. And I'm like, oh, I literally thought God would strike me down or something, right? Now, maybe the reason was they didn't want me to run into somebody, but the reality is, really, is that in the Bible? You can't run in the house of God? But this is the way that we acted. So as a sophomore in high school, I decided, you know what? I'm going to go to my youth pastor, and I just thought, man, I want to change some things. I want to make this like a place where I can invite my friends. And so I remember I went up to his office and said, I have some ideas. Of course, I was pretty bold and young and, again, probably dumb and just was like, I think this is what we need to do. And I was telling him all the things we need to do. And luckily for me, he, for some reason, was on board with all the things that I thought, we should do and everything like that. And so we began to change some things in our student ministry. We added a praise band, which back then was like, nobody really was doing a praise band, but actually how I got the idea is I came right here to this church, TVC, to a youth event, and they had like guitars and drums. And I'm like, we got to get some of that. Like, we need some of that. I mean, we had an organ and a piano, and it was like, man, this is dull. We need some energy and some music. And so we started a praise band, and we did all these different things. And it was really cool because you began to see, and I began to see, people's lives being changed. And when I look back, when I look back at that moment where I went and talked to my youth pastor about this thing, it came down to really one thing, that I wanted to create a place where my unchurched friends could come, could feel accepted, and want to come back. I wanted to create a place where my friends could come, feel accepted, maybe not agree with everything that our pastor was saying or that our youth pastor was saying, but they would have a desire to come back the next week. See, probably a year before all that, like I said, I showed up here to TVC, and my life was changed forever. It really was. And I gave my life to Christ, and I thought, I didn't know you could actually have fun and follow Jesus. I really didn't know that. I really didn't know if you could. And my life was so radically changed that I thought, I want so many people to know about this. And it actually meant for me that I was hanging out with friends who were doing things that I knew I couldn't do any longer. And it meant that I couldn't hang out with that same group of friends any longer, but I didn't want to disown them. I wanted them to come to church. But again, I wasn't going to invite them to my church because I didn't feel like they were accepted. So we made all these changes in our student ministry, and all of a sudden our student ministry began to grow, and other friends were inviting other friends. And at that point, back then this was, I think, pretty big, but we had over 50 or 60 kids coming to our student ministry every single week, and kids who were unchurched, and it was ugly, and it was messy, and it was a lot of different things, but it was amazing. And so in the middle of this, I really wasn't done. I thought, again, I didn't know any better. And so I went to my youth pastor. I said, we need to have like this big event. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? I said, let's have a lock-in, right? Which we put all these kids in a church and you lock them inside. I thought, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be fun. And so we planned this huge event. And as I look back at it, we had a live band there, and they were playing. And then we brought in a DJ, okay? Now, again, for us, we kind of go, that's cool and that's awesome. But get this. We brought in a DJ, and I just want you to think about this for a moment. Imagine with me a very conservative Baptist church where dancing was kind of like next to murder, okay? You don't dance. Like, it's not something that you choose to do. In the late 90s, and we were going to not only have dancing, we were going to play non-Christian music. Whoa, yeah. Like I'm telling you, it was like unheard of, right? You're going to do what? And I'm telling you, to be fair to myself, I wasn't doing any of this to rebel. I really wasn't doing it. I honestly had this desire in me to invite every person I knew to come to this thing so they could know about Jesus. Honestly, that's what I wanted to do. And that night, hundreds of kids showed up to this event. It was amazing. The only problem was that not only did 100 plus students show up, but the deacons of the church showed up too. And I remember as you walk into the gym, we had this live band playing, and over to the side we had a dance room with like disco lights and all these different things, and we were playing secular songs that when I actually went back and listened to some of the lyrics, I'm like, yeah, that wasn't probably a good choice to be playing that one right there. But we were playing these songs, and I remember the deacons walked in, and I was actually, honestly, I wasn't scared. I was pumped. I'm like, they are going to get to experience the greatest night ever. Like these guys, I mean, they need to loosen up anyway. They're going to love this, right? I mean, they're going to love everything about this, right? And we were told, or our youth pastor was told, that you will never do that again. And I remember when I first heard that, I was thinking, why? Like, that was awesome. I mean, that night, we probably had more visitors show up than the entire year in our big church on the weekend. But let me tell you why. Because somewhere along the way, people came along and said that church was for church people. And that you can come to church and you can be a part of it as long as you act like us and you do as we say. And I remember thinking to myself, this is wrong. Like, why aren't we celebrating? I mean, I literally thought, like, the next day on Sunday morning, like, this should be the front of the bulletin. Like, we had this amazing party, and they should have this big thing. They should be talking about it from the big stage, right up front. In fact, I thought, man, they should put me on one of those bed things and carry me in with palm fronds and waving them at me and saying, this was amazing. We had so many kids coming to this thing. So many kids accepted Jesus. It was the most amazing thing ever. But instead, they were thinking, how dare you? How dare you? You'll never do that again. Now, to be clear, I get some of it, and I'm not like mad or anything like that. But here's the problem. Is for a lot of churches, they say that you can be a part of us once you act like us. See, you can be a part of it as long as you act like we're telling you should act. Folks, I believe that this is why so many people want nothing to do with the local church. Because somewhere along the way, people who are in charge, they come along and they say that church is actually for church people. And once you get that, once you get the routine of what we do, once you understand what you're supposed to say and how you're supposed to act and the way you're supposed to behave, once you do that, then you can be a part of what we do. Instead of acting like, as followers of Christ, we are the outsiders. We treat everybody else like they're the outsiders. And I would say that the same thing that was birthed in me that year is the same passion that you and I should have as outsiders. And that's a passion for unchurched people. People who don't go to church, people who used to go to church but they refuse to have anything to do with it because of some bad experience. That you and I as outsiders, I believe we're called to have a passion and a desire to reach unchurched people.